depending on your point of view, the Sentry. So let's talk a little bit about the Sentry first in terms of in terms of the lore. Now, the thing about the Sentry is that, okay, so here's the thing about the Sentry. This is a new unit to StarCraft 2. It debuted in Legacy of the Void and has remained more or less unchanged. There have been some slight changes to how much energy, how long things last, but it's still fundamentally the same unit. There it is. Now, the thing about Sentries in terms of StarCraft 2 lore is that following the events of StarCraft 1, aka the Brood War, the Protoss numbers were significantly, thinned out with the loss of Ire, the loss of Ire, whole cities being destroyed primarily by the Zerg. And as a result, in the years between the wars, the Kalai engineers, people like Karax, will figure out a way to support their troops more efficiently and effectively. So this was the result, one of many, a robotic construct called the Sentry. So that is the base. So that is the baseline lore. So now we go on to where it is produced from, and the answer is, as per the Stalker and Zealot before, it is produced from a gateway. So let's go back to that. So the thing about, okay, so to make a Sentry, you first have to, of course you have to throw down a pylon. Let's move our other Sentry out of the way. You then have to throw down a gateway, then a cyber core. If you only, again, in this particular game mode, you see everything unlocked, but if you only build a gateway, you cannot build Sentry. You can only build the Zealot. Okay, we're gonna research. And from here, you can produce the Sentry. The hotkey is E. As a result, this is, and I'm gonna introduce a new system here. Its tech tier is, I will call it tier 1.5. Basically, tier 1 is the units that you can produce right away without anything else. Tier 2 are units that require going to the advanced structures tab, and tier 3 are units that, what the? And tier 3 are units, I don't know, what does it look like? That doesn't matter. And tier 3 are units that require not just advanced structures, but something additional after that, which there are not too many of. Okay, so like everything else here, once the gateway has transformed into a warp gate, you can warp in sentries wherever you so please. Warp in one here. Once this transforms, you can warp in another here. Now, normally we'll be talking about the upgrades of the Sentry, but the Sentry doesn't have any upgrades outside of the base. You know, if you go to a forge, you get like +1/+1. It will
upgrade complete.
Upgrade complete.
Upgrade complete.
There. Okay, but however, we will be spending some time to talk about, instead of all that, we'll be spending some time to talk about its abilities, because in the case of the Sentry, it's pretty important. So there are 3 abilities. I'm just going to leave this on the on the board. Now it's got 3 core abilities. The first is Force Field. And to really demonstrate what Force Field does, we're going to switch to the terrain to a small ramp. We're going to get a couple of these. And we're going to get some Zerglings. Yeah, about 10 will be enough. Now, the thing about, so again, in this demonstration, we're only going to focus on its ability. Its implications, we'll get to that later. So the thing about Force Field, give me a second. The thing about Force Field is that it creates a barrier that lasts, as it says here, 11 seconds, and things cannot cross. So for example, if I cast Force Field on this ramp, the sentries, cannot move down this ramp. I'm stuck. Of course, after 11 seconds, this shield will disappear. And there we go, and I can now move down the ramp. However, I can also, oh, this is perfect. I can also block other units from getting up this ramp, say these Zerglings. Well, they're stuck down there. They're not getting up. And as you can see in this simple combat example, the sentries are effectively protected from what comes up the ramp. What's this? Okay, this is the Zergling. Okay, so that's the force field. Now, oh, so the other thing that you'll notice that it says here that massive units will shatter force field on contact. What does that mean? Now, in the game there are a number of tags. For example, the Zergling is a light and a biological unit. There are some units in this case that do extra bonus to light. So, for example, a Hellion. Let's get a Hellion for example. So a Hellion does 8 damage but 14 damage to light. So a Hellion against a Zergling does additional damage. But that's not the point right now. The point right now are the massive units. So there are two for... no, not a DT. Let's get rid of him. So there are two massive units for Protoss, one massive unit for Terran, and one massive unit for Zerg. So... oh, right, it's the wrong side. There's also one more unit which is important, which is the Ravager. But we'll get to the Ravager last, for simplicity's sake. Okay, so let's say, you know, it's the same scenario. We put down some force fields, we can't move down the ramp. All of these units can break these force fields by just walking over them. Of course, the Colossus could just walk down the cliff. But let's say we have an Ultralisk. Yep, it just goes right through it. Same for the Archon. Protoss unit. See, Psionic, Massive. Massive will just pop these force fields. Now the reason that the Ravager is important is that even though the Ravager is only biological and normally will not be able to come up this ramp. Let's get the store back. Yeah, the Ravager's stuck. But the Ravager's ability is what's important, the Corrosive Bowl. It's this, we'll get to a Ravagers in a separate video specifically, but the Ravager balls can break the force fields. Yep. Okay, so that's the first ability. Okay, let's go back to the field. Go back to our terrain. Clear. Okay, so that's the first ability, force field. We'll go into a little bit more about that later. Now, the second ability it has is something called Guardian Shield. And what it does is that it reduces the damage taken by friendly units via range. So to demonstrate its ability, I'm going to get 3 Stalkers here. And we're going to get a couple of Marauders and about 6 Terrans. There are a few Terrans to demonstrate its purpose. So first I'm just going to let them attack. Let's get one more Stalker. First I'm just going to let them attack. And we'll see the results. Okay, after a bit of a tussle. Okay, the Terrans are eventually defeated with 2 pretty weak Stalkers remaining. However, if we have that same battle, but the difference is I activate Guardian Shield. Let's let them fight. I mean, it's partially because of the Sentry itself, but now we have 2 almost full health Stalkers. Basically what the Guardian Shield does is that it reduces the amount of damage that an enemy unit does firing against it. Now the last ability it has is Hallucination. So let's change the scenario a little. Okay, so let's say we're in the early game, and then you have a Reaper chasing us. Wait, I need to change this. Where is it? 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 It's the build. It's the reset show all entire map off. Okay, so let's take this scenario. In fact, let's talk about hallucination first. The last ability. What this allows you to do is that the definition is that it allows you to create a doppelganger that lasts for 43 seconds before they disappear that does no damage. So in this particular case, let's create. Oh, wonderful! I'm able to create a fake Colossus. Now the thing about hallucinations is that they do absolutely no damage. You see the Reapers taking no damage. But this is useful because, well, notice that the Reaper's still firing at the Colossus instead of your actual ground troops. Now, so you can do this for any Protoss unit. Doesn't matter whether you have it or not. It's all the same amount of energy. And if you're the opposing player and playing purely as let's say this Terran player, as an example, you will only see it as a real unit even though you're taking no damage. But another important part about hallucination is that it allows you to have high ground vision. This is something we talked about before. Okay, oh Reaper, let's get to the high ground. Okay, so right now the Stalker and the Sentry can't do anything against this Reaper. Kind of annoying. Okay. However, if we have an air unit, okay, the air unit gives high ground vision. Wherever this fake Phoenix flies, you can see. And that, and then, okay, so those are its core abilities. It doesn't have anything that you can upgrade beyond that. Okay, so this gets us nicely into our strengths of the Sentry. Now the first strength, as you saw, is defensibility. Let's go back to that web. By the way, the reason I chose this web is that it's very similar to the ones you get on a natural base, and the early game defense and everything. So let's say, let's give this Reaper. Let's get those Zergs back. We'll call it 15 Zerg. If I just attack, 4 sentries, 15 Zergs, this is the result. Yeah, the sentries all die. However, when I have force fields, well, now we'll see who has the high ground. It's over. These Zerglings are still trapped behind here. So these force fields on its own are incredibly important. Just for that, the ability to block off ramps, to block off access points for a little bit while you get other things up and running. As another actual scenario, going back to that Reaper. Yeah, even though the Reaper can get up here no problem, let's say you want to delay the Reaper. Reaper stuck. Yeah, it'll have to come back down here where it's in a much more vulnerable position. We'll get a little bit to that later, but again, the Sentry was a core unit for Protoss because that's how they need the Sentry to defend ramps, to defend areas. But you can do more than just defend with force field. Another strength of the Sentry tied with this, as I mentioned, is scouting. So realistically, now you'll see this in almost every game that you have Protoss, that players will be getting sentries in order to use a hallucination to get map vision of wherever they can. So if they, yep, here we go. Okay, so this is used to go to scout for expansions, to scout for areas. Oh dear. Okay, a bit of a lag. Okay, I think it's stabilized. Okay, and we want to know, let's say, in fact, let's have a better scenario. Okay, we want to know whether this is a planetary fortress or a orbital, because that's important information to our attacking troops. What we can do is once we start, is that we can get a hallucinated phoenix to scout across the map. Now, again, this doesn't have detection, so it's not perfect. And anything that it flies over, you as the player have vision. You can see it. In fact, it is almost critical. It is absolutely critical in Protoss versus Protoss because you need to get that scout to try and figure out like what kind of tech your opponent is going for. It's good in all other matchups as well. Now the last, well not the last strength, but the next strength coming back to the force field is battlefield control. What do I mean by that? Okay, let me demonstrate. Okay, we don't need this. We need a bunch of vultures. So, okay. Okay, I did the math of this earlier. Okay, what about Sentry? What Immortal? Yeah, so you can see that this is the one Immortal, not two. Okay, so you can see that this is roughly the equivalent amount of resources. Yes, the Protoss has more gas, Zerg has more supply. Okay, but if we just attack, a move, this is what's gonna happen. The sheer mass of roaches are gonna really put the hurt on this Protoss force and overwhelm it. Yeah, convincing victory. Absolutely crushed it. However, if we actually bother to use the force field to its full potential... Okay, so what I'm doing here is that I'm forcing the army to be split up. I'm forcing the back roaches to be cut off. And I'm forcing... You know, so my army's only fighting these two sides at the same time. In fact, let's cut off reinforcements. Yep, this roach is jumping around. Okay, we're out of energy. And even though the Protoss force eventually falls, it's a much smaller casualty. Let's see if I can do that a bit better. A lot of games have been won or lost purely off the ability of one's force fields. Okay, it's not a good force field actually. Let's try that one more time. Well, see, that's the thing. So depending on what the casualties are, it really comes down to your force field control. And for the professionals, they have some really fantastic force field control. So that allows you to control the battlefield against that, but it also helps you against things like, let's say, a pure Zergling army. 23 Zerglings. Okay, we tried our best to try to keep our units alive in order to maximize damage. This can be used for all races, but primarily against non-Protoss enemies. Okay, so those are the strengths of the Sentry. Let's talk about the weaknesses, and my gosh, there are weaknesses. Okay, the first is that it's high gas. Okay, here we go. This is a good example. Thankfully the map comes with one of these. Like if we look at a Sentry is 100 minerals, no, 50 minerals and 100 gas. If you look at just what your average Starcraft 2 expansion has, you'll notice that you're collecting minerals at a much higher rate than gas. As a result, As a result, you also like you can't produce that many sentries off one base. You'll have to get additional bases and so on. Compare that to a zealot. Like it's 1800 minerals here total. It's 225 here, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 mineral clusters compared to just 2 gases. So you're going to run out of gas very quickly. And the other important thing is that if we talk about Protoss tech structures, if you go for a lot of sentries, you are significantly delaying your other tech like robos, stargates, especially Templar archives. That's a lot of gas too. But having a lot of sentries does limit your abilities as gas income is limited in the game. Okay, now another clear-cut problem is low DPS. What do I mean by this? Well, let's take let's take a target, shall we? The Overlord. In fact, it's actually a meme in Starcraft that the attack of the Sentry is called a tickle beam. Okay, let's send in the ferocious Overlord. There's one ball against another ball, right? Yeah, this is gonna take a while. Let's force the Overlord to stay still. You see, the damage of even an upgraded oh, okay, I did switch that off. Even an upgraded Sentry is only well, the baseline is, let me show you the baseline. The baseline is only 6. Compare this to the Stalker, whose baseline is 13, 18, or even a Zealot, whose baseline is 8. And to demonstrate this most clearly, let's have the Stalker instead. It's considerably faster than the Sentry. Considerably faster. Better example still, 4 Marines. Compare that with the Sentry. Again, this Overlord does happen to have speed. Yeah, it barely does any damage. Like it just flies away with most of its health bars intact. The Sentry has very low DPS because its strength is not in a frontline unit or in a frontline role. Now the other big weakness of the Sentry is its low HP. It doesn't have much health. It's only got 40-40 compared to the 80-80, 70-70, and 50-100. So if we take another example, let's go back to the field. We get, say, 4 Protoss Terrans. Against, say, 2 Sentries. Yeah, they made quick work of that. You also saw it in the Zerg example. Furthermore, Furthermore, if we do this with the Baneling, which we will get to in a future video, once we reach the Zerg. Yes, double KO, yes. But look at the amount of resources in comparison and the supply. These things are effectively, well, the joke is that they're made out of glass because they kind of are. They die to a lot of things. Coming back to an actual Starcraft 2 scenario, let's say we have this. Okay, let's say it's Protoss versus Protoss. This is the scenario. Assuming there's no other factors, like it's common for one group to just snipe off the Sentry and then just run. Just flee. Because the amount of damage done is already significant. Now, the other thing I would like to touch upon the Sentry that I have not yet touched on is about terrain. Let's go back to the ramp. Is about its energy. So this is the first unit that we're dealing with that has an energy bar. Some people call it mana. Now, what you saw so far is a Sentry with full energy, but a Sentry does not and never will spawn with full energy. So if we switch it off, and we warp in, let's say, the 4 Sentries from earlier, and we have the Zergs on the field. Let's see where those Zerglings, there we go. Let's get those 15 Zerglings. We attack. Oh, this is the wrong map. My mistake. Okay, we click attack. These are freshly warped in Sentries. Okay, so we're holding the ramp. It's going okay. We're taking down some Zerglings. The wall is holding. Okay, let's say I missed Michael. Not enough energy. I don't have any more energy for force fields. In fact, if we just up it to 20 Zerglings and let's take away 1 Sentry, which is a very real scenario by the way in early game. Okay, the 3 Sentries, they're holding the line. The force field is there. Okay, this is gonna expire any second now, and pop. Okay, it's another one, and
Not enough energy.
yeah, these Sentries are dead. So the thing about Sentries and energy as a whole is that you have to warp them in early for them to build up the energy. So it generally goes up one at a time, as you can see here. Therefore, you need to warp in your Sentries early if you want to use them in combat. If you just warp Sentries in, they're gonna have 1 force field, nothing else. No Guardian Shield, no Hallucination, nothing else. Okay, so with that, that concludes the video on the Sentry. In conclusion, the Sentry is a very important spellcaster unit that you have to micro, you have to use its abilities well, but using those abilities well can completely change the way a battle goes and by extension the game. Furthermore, it is a wonderful scout tool, but you are gonna need to do your best to keep it alive. It's kind of like those, it's kind of like an officer unit. On its own, it's just a man, but it has certain, or woman, but it has certain abilities tied to it that allow it to do wonders. Like take out these Zerglings. Okay, and with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Do like and subscribe for future content. I will be doing a series, I will be continuing the series rather, going through every single unit that you see on the screen, plus the ones here, as well as the buildings. Okay, with that, okay, thank you for watching.